Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a medieval kitchen, a room filled with the sounds of bustling activity and the smells of herbs, bread, and fresh-baked honey cakes. Picture it. Cool stone walls, a low ceiling, and dim candlelight flickering in the corners. The floor, rough and uneven from centuries of use, creaks as you walk across it. The faint hum of quiet conversations mixes with the rhythmic motion of nuns working, hands moving with practiced ease as they prepare the day's meals. There's a calm in this kitchen, an almost sacred atmosphere that you can't help but feel as you take in the sights and smells around you. The kitchen isn't just a place for cooking, it's a place where devotion and tradition are blended into every dish, every loaf of bread, and yes, even every honey cake. You probably won't survive the harsh realities of 15th century monastic life, but you're in for a treat tonight as we explore the medieval nuns' honey cake recipe, a delicacy that's been baked, perfected, and passed down through generations of women who dedicated their lives to service, faith, and community. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening, post your location and local time in the comments. Let's see where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As we step into this medieval kitchen, we're surrounded by an air of quiet focus. The nuns move about with purpose, their hands steady as they mix ingredients, knead dough, and prepare meals. There's an ancient wisdom in the way they work, a knowledge passed down through the centuries. This isn't just about cooking, it's about a sacred calling, an expression of faith in every act. The nuns were responsible not only for preparing food for themselves and the monks, but also for nourishing their entire community. Meals in these kitchens were more than just a way to fill the stomach. They were offerings, small acts of devotion, and in many cases vital to the survival of the monastery. The kitchen itself is a place of contrast. The stone walls and floors keep it cool, especially in the warmer months, and the large hearth crackles with warmth as logs burn, creating a cozy atmosphere amid the otherwise functional space. There's something incredibly comforting about the simple way this space is organised, uncluttered and efficient. On one side, large cauldrons simmer over the fire, while wooden shelves hold jars of preserved herbs and dried fruits, staples of the nuns' cooking. But the real star of the kitchen tonight is the honey cake. Sweet, golden, and rich, it's a treat that has been woven into the fabric of the nuns' lives. The honey cake, as we'll come to learn, was no ordinary dessert. It was both food and ritual, a deeply symbolic offering that connected the nuns to the divine. For centuries, honey has been considered a sacred food. The ancient Egyptians regarded it as the food of the gods, and in medieval Europe it was often used in religious ceremonies and as a medicinal cure-all. Honey was prized not only for its sweetness, but also for its supposed magical qualities. In the monastery kitchen, it was used to make everything from honey mead to sweet cakes that could be enjoyed during feast days or served to guests of the abbey. But the honey cake was special. It was more than just a recipe. It was part of the nuns' spiritual practice. Imagine the scene. The nuns are gathered around a large stone table, their hands moving deftly over the ingredients. They mix the flour and honey, adding a pinch of exotic spices, cinnamon, cloves, perhaps even a touch of ginger, ingredients that have been brought to Europe through trade routes that stretched as far as India and the Middle East. The cake batter is thick and fragrant, the scent of honey filling the air. As the nuns work, there's a sense of calm that permeates the room, almost as if the act of baking these cakes is an extension of their prayer. Their movements are meditative, purposeful, and centered in faith. They bake the cakes not just for nourishment but as an offering, a physical manifestation of their devotion to God. Historians still argue whether the medieval monastic kitchens were truly the birthplace of many of the recipes we now associate with modern cooking, or if they merely refined the cooking practices of the surrounding communities. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. It's well known that monasteries were centres of learning, and their kitchens often led the way in terms of food preservation, preparation techniques, and the use of ingredients. But it's also true that the nuns and monks who worked in these kitchens weren't inventing anything new. They were simply preserving and passing down the knowledge of the past, while incorporating new ingredients brought in by the expansion of trade. One thing is certain, the medieval kitchen was the heart of the monastery. It wasn't just where the food was prepared, It was where the community came together. The smell of freshly baked bread and the sound of laughter and conversation could be heard throughout the monastery as the nuns worked. In many ways, the kitchen was a place of sanctuary, a place where the spiritual and the earthly came together. Food was both sacred and everyday, a vital part of life that had the power to nourish the body and the soul. So, as we sit here in the warmth of the medieval kitchen surrounded by the sights and smells of freshly baked honey cakes, let's take a moment to consider the role of food in the lives of the nuns. For them, cooking wasn't just a chore, it was a form of service, an act of worship and a way to connect with the divine. The honey cake, simple though it may seem, was a testament to their devotion, a small sweet offering made with love, care and prayer. It was a reminder that in the most humble of kitchens, amid the stone walls and wooden tables, the sacred and the mundane could coexist. And as we continue our journey through this medieval kitchen, we'll dive deeper into the history of honey, its sacred significance, and its role in both religious and culinary traditions. But first, let's pause and reflect on the nuns' daily work. Their role in the kitchen was central to the monastery's functioning, and their food was an extension of their faith. These humble women, with their simple recipes and dedication to service, were the unsung heroes of medieval culinary history. Imagine the soft sound of wooden spoons scraping against large wooden bowls as the nuns go about their work. The kitchen is quiet, yet there's an undeniable sense of purpose to everything they do. This is no ordinary work. This is part of a greater calling. These nuns, who have taken vows of silence, still find ways to express themselves through their cooking. For them, the act of preparing food is not just about providing sustenance. It's an offering of devotion, a chance to serve their community and honour their faith through every slice of bread or dollop of honey. Their daily routine is structured around prayer, work, and service to others. The nuns wake up before dawn, gathering in the dimly lit chapel for the first prayers of the day. Afterward, they move to their tasks, some tending the gardens, others working in the infirmary, and still others in the kitchen, where the smell of fresh-baked bread and honey cake fills the air. The kitchen is a vital part of the monastery's daily rhythm. Meals are not just a time to eat. They are moments of fellowship, of sharing in the labour that connects the community together. The nuns are not simply cooking for themselves, but for the monks, the poor, and any travellers who might pass through the abbey gates. The food they prepare is a reflection of the monastery's values: self-sufficiency, hospitality and charity. The honey cake, rich with golden sweetness, is one of the treats that they bake in large quantities, ensuring that there is always enough to share. It's made with simple ingredients: flour, honey and eggs. But the combination is magical, especially when the cake is served warm, fresh from the oven, with a dusting of powdered sugar on top. Historians still debate whether the food prepared in medieval kitchens was as varied as it is in modern times, or if these nuns stuck to a strict, monotonous diet. While we may never know for sure, it's likely that the nuns found ways to make their meals as interesting as possible given the limited resources they had. The honey cake, for example, could be flavoured with various spices, and it might even be served at feasts, sprinkled with dried fruits or nuts to make it more festive. But in everyday life, it was the simplicity of the ingredients that mattered most. The nuns' lives were centred on service, and their kitchen work was no different. They were constantly preparing meals not just for their own sustenance, but to feed others as well. The honey cake, therefore, held more significance than just being a tasty treat. It was a symbol of their commitment to nourishing not only the body, but the soul. In a world where survival often depended on the kindness of others, the nuns' ability to bake and share their food became a way to spread love, care and hospitality to those around them. For many of the nuns, the kitchen became a sanctuary. In the midst of their demanding work and spiritual practices, it was a place where they could escape the outside world, a place where their hands could find solace in the rhythm of kneading dough or stirring honey into a batter. There was something meditative about the act of cooking, something grounding. For some, it was the quiet moment spent with a rolling pin, or the gentle sound of mixing that brought a sense of peace. The kitchen was their quiet retreat, a space where faith and labour intertwined. But let's not romanticize it too much. Life in the medieval kitchen was hard work. The nuns didn't have the luxury of modern conveniences. There were no electric mixers or ovens with timers. Every loaf of bread, every honey cake had to be made by hand. The ovens were large, stone affairs that required constant tending, And let's not forget the cleaning. Medieval kitchens were filled with the mess and noise of daily life. Even though these kitchens were central to the monastery, they were often cold, poorly lit, and could be quite chaotic. Despite the hard work, the kitchen was a place where community was formed. It was where the nuns gathered together, where they shared laughter and stories, and where bonds were strengthened. In many ways, the kitchen was the heart of the monastery, a space where every action, whether it was chopping vegetables or stirring honey into a pot, was a reminder of the shared purpose that connected the nuns and their community. Historians still argue about how much leisure time the nuns had. Some suggest that their lives were dominated by strict schedules and routines, leaving little time for relaxation. Others believe that the communal nature of the kitchen provided moments of joy and camaraderie, where laughter could be shared over a loaf of bread or a cake fresh from the oven. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. Regardless, the act of cooking in the medieval kitchen, especially baking something as beloved as honey cake, was never simply a task. It was an act of service, devotion, and love. Every cake baked, every loaf of bread shared, was a way of reinforcing the nuns' dedication to their community and to God. It was more than just a job. It was their way of making the world a little sweeter, one honey cake at a time. As we move forward, we'll dive into the history of honey itself. We'll explore why honey was so valued, not just for its sweetness, but for its sacred and medicinal properties. From the earliest days of civilization, honey has been revered as a magical substance. It was believed to have healing powers and was often used in religious ceremonies. In the medieval period, honey was seen as the perfect food, nourishing, sweet, and divine. Let's take a closer look at how honey came to play such a central role in monastic life, and why it became the key ingredient in the beloved honey cake. Now, let's talk about honey, this sweet, golden substance that seems almost magical in its qualities. Long before medieval nuns ever baked their honey cakes, honey had already earned its place as a sacred and revered ingredient in numerous cultures. It's been called the food of the gods, and for good reason. Ancient Egyptians were the first to treat honey as a divine substance, believing it had the power to heal, preserve, and even bless the dead in the afterlife. Fast forward to medieval Europe, and honey was just as revered. It wasn't just something you put in your tea, it was part of religious ceremonies, medical treatments, and of course, the kitchen. In the medieval monastic world, honey was viewed as a gift from the heavens. The monks and nuns, living a life of simplicity and devotion, saw the bees as divine messengers of sorts, producing the sweet nectar that could heal wounds, soothe ailments, and provide nourishment. Honey was prized not just for its sweetness, but also for its preservative qualities. Unlike sugar, which wasn't as widely available in medieval Europe, honey was abundant, especially in regions where the nuns could manage beehives on their own, or with help from local farmers. In many ways, honey represented the intersection of nature's bounty and divine blessing. The nuns were experts in using honey in many ways, often blending it with herbs and other natural ingredients to create remedies or enhance the flavour of their dishes. But what makes honey even more fascinating is the fact that it was often used as a form of currency. Yes, you heard that right. Honey was sometimes so valuable that it could be traded for goods or used as a form of payment in various medieval markets. When you think about it, it makes perfect sense. Honey has a long shelf life, unlike many other foods, and was an essential part of the diet for both the sick and the healthy. This makes it all the more special when you consider the fact that nuns were not just baking for their fellow sisters, they were also providing food and medicine to the poor and to travellers who sought refuge at the monastery. Historians still argue whether honey's role in medieval medicine was exaggerated. Some suggest that honey was more of a symbol of divine healing than an actual remedy, while others claim that its medicinal benefits were well understood at the time. Modern science has confirmed that honey does indeed have antibacterial and healing properties, but in the medieval world, honey's mystical reputation played an even bigger role in its perceived benefits. Whether it was soothing a sore throat, healing a wound, or sweetening a cake, honey was a symbol of hope and healing. Now let's return to the nuns. These women were well aware of honey's powers, and they used it in many ways. It wasn't just part of their honey cakes. Honey was an essential ingredient in everything from mead to medicinal concoctions. In the monastery kitchen, honey was more than just a sweetener. It was part of their entire culinary repertoire, woven into the fabric of the monastic lifestyle. They would mix it into everything they made, porridge, soups, and even drinks. But none of this compared to the honey cake, a dish that combined honey's divine sweetness with the simple, hearty ingredients that were available to the nuns. Imagine for a moment the scent of honey filling the air as the nuns prepare their famous honey cakes. The golden syrup is stirred into the batter, slowly being incorporated with flour, eggs, and spices. The texture of the cake is dense, almost sponge-like, but it holds a sweetness that is unlike anything else. As the cake bakes in the stone oven, the heat causes the honey to caramelize slightly, creating a beautiful golden crust that is irresistible to anyone nearby. Once the cake is cool enough to touch, it's cut into generous slices and shared with the monks, the other nuns, and any guests who may have arrived at the monastery. For the nuns, baking was not just about feeding the body, it was an act of devotion. Honey, with its sweetness and purity, was considered a divine gift, and it became the centerpiece of many of their culinary creations. The honey cake was a way to take that sacred ingredient and transform it into something that nourished both the body and the spirit. Every bite of the cake was a reminder of the nuns' devotion to God, their community, and the people who relied on them for care and sustenance. Historians still debate whether honey cakes were a common feature in all medieval monastic kitchens, or if they were specific to certain regions or orders. Some argue that honey cakes were mostly enjoyed during feasts or special occasions, while others believe that they were part of the everyday diet, consumed regularly by the nuns as a simple but cherished treat. Whatever the case may be, the presence of honey cakes in the medieval kitchen was a testament to the central role that food played in the monastic life. Food wasn't just about survival, it was about providing comfort, sharing love, and above all, serving God. As we continue to explore the nuns' culinary world, it's worth remembering that honey cakes weren't the only thing they made. These kitchens were filled with an array of dishes that range from simple, everyday meals to elaborate feasts for the abbey's guests. But no matter the dish, honey played a starring role. Whether it was used to sweeten a bowl of porridge or as the main ingredient in a celebratory cake, honey's presence in the kitchen was undeniable. And as we turn our attention to the next part of our journey, we'll take a closer look at the ovens in these medieval kitchens, how they worked, how they were maintained, and how the nuns used them to bake not just honey cakes, but all kinds of foods that help sustain their way of life. Let's move on to the ovens. Yes, those big stone behemoths that seem to hold the very essence of medieval baking. In a modern kitchen, it's easy to take an oven for granted. Just set the temperature, wait for the timer, and your food is ready. But in medieval times, baking was far more labour-intensive, and the ovens were just as much a part of the community as the cooks themselves. These massive stone ovens were usually located at the heart of the monastery's kitchen, often situated next to the hearth where the nuns prepared their other dishes. The ovens in medieval monasteries were typically built out of stone or brick, and they were designed to retain heat for as long as possible. The baking process was incredibly time-consuming, with every step requiring precision and patience. Nuns would start by building a fire inside the oven, often using wood from the abbey's own forest, which would heat the oven to the right temperature. Once the oven had reached the optimal temperature, typically around 400 degrees Fahrenheit, any remaining embers were cleared out, and the dough or batter was carefully placed inside. Because the ovens weren't as predictable as modern ones, a significant amount of skill was required to know exactly when the oven was ready for baking. Some nuns developed an almost sixth sense for this, learning how to judge the temperature based on the feel of the air, the sound of the fire, or even the colour of the stone. Once the cake was inside, the oven door would be sealed with clay or brick, and the nuns would wait, their work far from done. But let's not underestimate the complexity of this process. Medieval ovens were not equipped with thermostats or timers. It was all about experience and intuition. In fact, there was a kind of quiet pride in the nuns' ability to bake to perfection in such an ancient, unpredictable oven. The heat retention was key. It allowed them to bake large batches of bread, cakes, and pies all at once, using a single fire. For the honey cakes, the baking process was particularly important. The nuns needed just the right amount of heat to caramelize the honey, allowing it to form that golden, slightly crisp crust that was the hallmark of a well-made honey cake. The nuns would often bake in batches, preparing multiple cakes at once to ensure there was enough to share. After all, their role wasn't just to bake for themselves, it was to provide for others as well. The honey cakes would cool in the kitchen, ready to be served to the monks, the guests, and the local community. Every slice of cake wasn't just a serving of food, it was a small gesture of kindness and hospitality, an offering to the people who relied on the monastery for support. Historians still debate whether the stone ovens used in medieval kitchens were as efficient as modern ovens. Some argue that these ovens, while ingenious for their time, were relatively inefficient and used a lot of firewood. Others suggest that medieval bakers had developed techniques to make the most of their ovens, using the residual heat to bake multiple items in a single session. Regardless of the specifics, it's clear that these ovens were a cornerstone of monastic life, allowing the nuns to bake not just honey cakes, but all the breads, pastries, and treats that helped sustain their community. As the honey cakes baked, the nuns would often continue their work around the kitchen, preparing other foods or tending to their gardens. The smells of baking bread, herbs, and honey would waft through the air, creating a comforting, almost sacred atmosphere. For the nuns, the kitchen was a place of solace, a space where their faith and labour intertwined. But while the ovens were a central piece of this ritual, it's important to remember that the nuns didn't just cook. They cultivated a lifestyle of hospitality and charity, opening their doors to travellers, pilgrims, and those in need. In fact, many medieval monasteries became famous for their hospitality, offering shelter and food to anyone who sought refuge. The honey cakes were often served to guests as a symbol of the monastery's warm welcome. Imagine a weary traveller, perhaps a monk or a pilgrim, arriving at the abbey after a long journey. They're tired, hungry, and perhaps a little anxious, but upon entering the abbey, they're greeted with the smell of freshly baked honey cakes and the warmth of the nuns' hospitality. These small acts of kindness were central to the nuns' mission, and food, especially honey cake, was their offering of goodwill. Historians still argue whether the practice of hospitality in medieval monasteries was purely selfless, or if it also served a practical purpose. Some suggest that it was a way for the monasteries to gain favour and wealth, as guests often left donations in exchange for the food and shelter they received. Others believe that hospitality was a genuine expression of the monastic vow to serve others, and that the nuns truly saw their food as an offering of charity. Either way, the honey cake played an important role in this exchange, symbolising the monastery's commitment to nourishing both body and soul. As we think about these ovens and the role they played in the daily lives of the nuns, it's easy to see how deeply connected food was to every aspect of their lives. From the careful preparation of honey cakes to the communal act of baking for others, the kitchen was a place of service, hospitality, and faith. The ovens, though rudimentary by modern standards, were central to this process, allowing the nuns to continue their sacred work. And as we move forward in our story, we'll explore how the rise of trade routes influenced the flavours of medieval baking and brought new spices into the nuns' kitchens, spices that would forever change the honey cake recipe. As the medieval world expanded, so did its networks of trade. Monasteries, with their self-sustaining gardens and storerooms, were crucial nodes in these exchanges. While the nuns remained focused on their spiritual and communal duties, they were also recipients of a global trade system that brought exotic spices, herbs, and other ingredients from distant lands. The honey cake, once a simple and humble treat, was now an evolving recipe, one influenced by the flavours of the Far East, the Middle East, and even Africa. And let's be clear, while the nuns might not have known the exact origins of every ingredient they used, they were certainly aware of how these imports transformed their baking. It all began with the Silk Road, a vast network of trade routes that spanned across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Through this network, merchants brought spices like cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, and ginger into the heart of medieval Europe. The monastic kitchens were some of the first places to experiment with these spices, using them to enhance everything from bread to cakes to stews. For the nuns, these spices were both a new source of flavour and a way to enrich their offerings to the community. In the same way that honey symbolised divine sweetness, these spices now symbolise the intersection of earthly and heavenly gifts, brought together in a single recipe. Imagine, if you will, the arrival of a package at the monastery, hand-carried by a merchant or a wandering monk returning from the east. The excitement in the kitchen would be palpable, as the nuns gathered around to inspect the small jars of cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg. These were spices that had travelled thousands of miles through deserts, mountains, and across seas. They were rare, precious, and expensive. Yet for the nuns, they were tools that would enable them to continue their sacred work in the kitchen. The next time they baked their honey cakes, they would add just a pinch of cinnamon, perhaps a touch of ginger, and maybe a few cloves to create a richer, more complex flavour profile. The humble honey cake was now transformed, becoming a dish that mirrored the diversity of the medieval world. Historians still debate whether these spices were used immediately, or if their introduction to European kitchens was a gradual process. Some suggest that the first spices were primarily used by the wealthier classes, while monasteries and convents adopted them a few decades later. Others argue that by the 13th century, spices were becoming common in monastic kitchens, where the nuns used them not only to enhance flavour, but also to preserve food, a task that was critical before the advent of refrigeration. What's certain, though, is that the nuns were early adopters of these exotic ingredients, using them in ways that were both practical and symbolic. For the honey cake, the addition of spices was more than just a flavour enhancement. It was an act of connection, a way of joining the far-off lands of the East with the local traditions of the abbey. The nuns were not only baking for their own community, but also, in a way, for the larger world. As the spices blended with the rich honey, they created a cake that was both comforting and exotic, sweet and spicy, simple yet complex. It was a reflection of the world around them, a world full of contrasts of distant cultures and shared beliefs. But let's pause for a moment and consider the deeper symbolism here. The honey cake, with its rich, golden honey and the spices from the far corners of the earth, represented the connection between the divine and the earthly. Honey, symbolizing God's sweetness and grace, was the foundation of the cake, while the spices, coming from distant lands, were the representation of the world's vastness, its diversity, and its interconnectedness. The nuns, through their baking, brought together these two elements, divine grace and earthly experiences, in a single dish. The arrival of these spices wasn't the only thing that changed in the monastic kitchen. Alongside the influx of new ingredients came new techniques. The nuns began to experiment with the ways they prepared and combined flavours. They didn't just throw cinnamon into the honey cake and call it a day. They carefully considered how each spice interacted with the honey, how it complemented the flour, and how it affected the texture of the cake. The nuns' understanding of the alchemy of cooking grew with each new addition to their kitchens, and as the honey cake became more complex, so too did the role of the nuns in the community. They were no longer just caretakers of sacred recipes, they were innovators, experimenting with the tastes and textures of the world around them. Historians still debate the role of these spices in medieval cooking. Were they simply a luxury for the rich, or were they something more? Some believe that the nuns used them primarily in their religious ceremonies and feasts, while others argue that the spices were deeply embedded in everyday cooking. Whatever the case may be, the spices transformed medieval cooking, and the honey cake became a symbol of that transformation. The simple, honey-sweetened treat became a fusion of local and foreign, divine and earthly, traditional and experimental. As we continue our journey through the nuns' kitchen, we'll explore the connection between food and religion. The honey cake, with its sacred ingredients, was more than just a treat. It was a form of worship, a way for the nuns to offer their labour to God. In the monastic kitchen, food was never just food. It was an offering, an act of service, and a reminder of the divine. And as we delve deeper into the role of honey cakes in medieval religious feasts, we'll see just how much more they represented than just sweetness. Now, let's shift our focus to a key aspect of the honey cake's life in the monastery: the religious feasts and celebrations. For the nuns, baking honey cakes wasn't just an everyday task. It was an integral part of their spiritual life, tied directly to the rhythms of the religious calendar. Food in medieval monasteries was never just for sustenance. It was imbued with deep meaning, offering both nourishment and a chance to serve God and the community. The honey cake, as one of the most cherished treats, played a significant role in these religious feasts, where it would often be presented to guests, monks and fellow nuns as part of larger sacred meals. Religious feasts in the monastery were not just times for eating. They were sacred occasions that marked significant events in the liturgical calendar. These celebrations could be tied to saints' feast days, important religious anniversaries, or even moments of personal devotion for the nuns themselves. The honey cake, with its rich, sweet flavour and the addition of exotic spices, was a fitting offering during these celebrations, symbolising both the bounty of the earth and the sweetness of divine grace. One of the most important religious feasts for the nuns was the Feast of the Assumption, a day that marked the belief that the Virgin Mary was taken bodily into heaven. This occasion, like many others, would have been celebrated with the best that the kitchen had to offer, and honey cakes would have certainly played a role in the feast. Imagine a long wooden table set with platters of honey cakes, breads, and other sweets, all carefully prepared by the nuns as a sign of gratitude and devotion. The honey cakes, warm from the oven, would have been served with a flourish, their sweet spiced aroma filling the air. Guests, whether fellow nuns, monks, or visiting pilgrims, would have been invited to partake in the feast, celebrating the mystery of the Assumption through food and prayer. Historians still debate whether such feasts were more celebratory or devotional. Some suggest that the feasts were purely spiritual events, filled with prayers and chants, while others believe they were more communal and celebratory, bringing together monks, nuns, and travellers for a joyous occasion. Either way, food, and specifically honey cakes, played an important role in these religious gatherings. The cakes were not just meant to nourish, they were symbols of the nuns' devotion, acts of service to both the body and the soul. While honey cakes were often reserved for special occasions, they were also used as part of the everyday rhythm of life in the abbey. Monastic life was regulated by a strict schedule of prayers, meals, and work. The nuns would gather for prayers at specific times of the day, and their meals were always a time for reflection, conversation, and, yes, a little indulgence. The honey cake, which had been carefully baked and set aside for these moments, became a small but significant part of this routine. Each time a nun took a bite of a honey cake, she was not just savouring its sweetness, she was also taking part in the larger tradition of the abbey, of the community, and of the divine work they did together. But the honey cake's role in religious feasts wasn't limited to the monastery alone. As the nuns baked for guests and pilgrims who arrived at the abbey, the honey cake became an ambassador for the monastery's hospitality. Pilgrims travelling on long journeys would often stop at monasteries for food and rest. These pilgrims were sometimes in need of healing or comfort, and the nuns, with their humble kitchen, would offer them a warm welcome. The honey cake, with its sweet, comforting taste, became a symbol of this care, of the nuns' dedication to serving others. The pilgrims, exhausted from their travels, would find solace not only in the spiritual solace of the abbey, but in the physical comfort of a honey cake, served alongside a warm cup of tea or mead. Historians still argue over how much interaction there was between the nuns and the outside world. Some suggest that the nuns were more isolated, only receiving guests on rare occasions. Others believe that the monasteries were vital hubs of community life, welcoming travellers from all over Europe. What we do know, however, is that the nuns' hospitality was central to their role in society. The food they prepared was an extension of their faith, a way of welcoming the stranger and the weary into their fold. And it wasn't just about offering a meal, it was about offering comfort, hope, and a sense of belonging. The honey cake, in all its sweetness, was one of the primary ways the nuns could share these gifts. The connection between food and faith in medieval monasteries is something that has fascinated historians for centuries. The act of preparing food, especially for others, was seen as a form of service. It was an opportunity to participate in the divine work of God, to offer up one's labour in the form of a simple yet sacred meal. The honey cake, as a part of that offering, was more than just a treat. It was a way to express devotion, to show hospitality, and to share the love of God with those around them. Whether it was during a religious feast, a special occasion, or a quiet meal shared among the nuns, the honey cake was always a symbol of something greater, something divine. Historians still debate the exact role of food in medieval spirituality. Was it simply a reflection of daily life, or did it carry a deeper, more sacred meaning? Some argue that food was an essential part of the monastic mission, helping to foster community and service, while others believed that it was merely a means to an end, sustenance for the body. Regardless of the interpretation, one thing is clear: food, and especially the honey cake, was a sacred part of the nuns' lives. It was an offering, a prayer made tangible, a gift that could nourish both body and soul. As we continue our journey, we'll look at the fascinating ways honey cakes were woven into the fabric of monastic life, and how their story continues to unfold even in modern kitchens. Let's take a moment now to focus on the enduring legacy of the honey cake, its evolution over time, from its humble beginnings in the medieval monastery kitchens to the sweet treat we recognise today. You see, while the nuns' honey cakes were initially part of a much larger tradition of medieval monastic baking, they didn't remain confined to the abbey walls. Over the centuries, the recipe would travel beyond the monastery and be passed down through generations, making its way into the kitchens of common folk to royal courts and even into modern bakeries. One of the most fascinating aspects of the honeycake's journey is how it evolved alongside changes in European history. As monarchs and feudal lords began to wield more influence over the lands, and as the aristocracy's tastes became more refined, the once simple honeycake began to take on new forms. The addition of new ingredients, perhaps almonds or raisins, or the introduction of sugar after it became more widely available, brought a new level of decadence to the humble cake. These changes reflected the growing wealth and complexity of European society, and the honeycake mirrored those transformations. While the honeycake's roots remained firmly planted in medieval monastic kitchens, the broader public began to embrace this cake not just as an offering for religious occasions, but as a delightful dessert for all manner of celebrations. It wasn't just for saints' feast days or religious holidays anymore. It found its way onto tables for birthdays, weddings, and even harvest festivals. In fact, the honeycake became so ubiquitous that its origins were sometimes forgotten, and it was simply seen as a traditional dessert, a sweet symbol of family gatherings and festive times. Historians still argue about when the honeycake began to transition from its strictly religious origins to a more secular treat. Some suggest it was during the Renaissance, when the European palate was beginning to open to new ideas and flavours. The increasing use of sugar, for instance, allowed cakes to become more elaborate and ornate, and the honeycake was no exception. Other historians point to the growing importance of weddings and birthdays as key moments when honeycakes became part of secular celebrations. Whatever the case, by the time the cake made its way into wider European society, it had undergone several transformations, each one adding a layer of flavour, richness, and meaning. But even as the honeycake evolved, the heart of its original recipe remained intact. The use of honey as a central ingredient continued to be a key feature of the cake, despite the influx of new ingredients and baking techniques. Honey, with its deep ties to the divine and to nature, remained the soul of the cake. It was what made the honey cake unique, what made it stand out from other desserts. Even when new spices and fruits found their way into the cake, honey retained its sacred role as the cornerstone of the recipe. It was a reminder of the nuns' devotion and of the sweet connection between earth and heaven. As time marched on, the honeycake's journey didn't stop at the edges of Europe. With the rise of global trade, the recipe travelled further, finding its way into new regions. In the 19th and 20th centuries, European immigrants brought their beloved honey cakes with them to the Americas, where they were embraced by new communities. The flavours of the honey cake morphed once again, as ingredients and techniques were adapted to suit new palates and new ingredients. In the United States, honey cake became a popular choice for Jewish New Year celebrations, further cementing its place in the hearts of people around the world. In modern times, the honey cake has continued to adapt. Today, it can be found in a variety of forms, from simple, rustic cakes to elaborate layered confections, often drizzled with honey or dusted with powdered sugar. But even in its modern iterations, the spirit of the honey cake remains unchanged. It's a symbol of hospitality, of connection, and of the sweet, simple pleasures that make life worthwhile. Whether it's served at a family gathering, a holiday meal, or even a quiet moment of reflection, the honey cake continues to carry with it the legacy of those medieval nuns who first baked it as an offering of devotion. Historians still debate how much the nuns themselves would have recognised the honey cake in its modern form. Some suggest that they would have been surprised by the modern variations, which are often much sweeter and more ornate than their original cakes. Others argue that the essence of the honey cake, the combination of honey, spices and love, would have remained familiar even to them. After all, the nuns were skilled bakers who understood that the most important ingredient in any recipe is the heart with which it's made. As we reflect on the honey cake's journey, we see that it is more than just a recipe. It's a story. It's a story of faith, community and devotion, passed down from one generation to the next. It's a reminder that food is not just for the body, it's for the soul. From the cold, stone kitchens of medieval monasteries to the bustling kitchens of modern homes, the honey cake has remained a symbol of nourishment, hospitality and connection. And though its form may have changed over time, its essence remains the same. It is a gift, an offering, a way of sharing love and sweetness with those around us. In the next part of our journey, we'll take a closer look at the quieter work of the nuns, their silent devotion in the kitchen, and their role in keeping these traditions alive through centuries of change. They may not have been the ones to write grand histories or compose epic poems, but their work in the kitchen, preserving recipes, nurturing the community and honouring God, has left an indelible mark on the culinary traditions we enjoy today. The quiet work of the nuns in the kitchen is often overlooked in the grand narratives of history. They didn't lead armies or pen revolutionary texts, but their impact on the culinary traditions of their time, and ours, cannot be overstated. These women dedicated their lives not only to prayer and service, but also to the art of nourishing others. Every loaf of bread they baked, every honey cake they perfected, was a silent act of devotion. The nuns were, in many ways, the unsung heroines of medieval culinary history. Their work was carried out in the background, behind closed kitchen doors, but it was no less essential to the life of the monastery and the community they served. The kitchen itself was a sacred space, a place where the nuns could focus their minds and hearts on their work. There was no need for loud proclamations or outward displays of success. The kitchen was where their skills, their patience, and their devotion could shine through in the most quiet, unassuming ways. The nuns were not trying to impress anyone with their culinary creations, they were simply serving a higher purpose. The honey cakes they baked weren't meant to be showy or extravagant, they were meant to be simple, nourishing, and full of love. In this way, the act of baking became a form of prayer, a small everyday offering that reflected the nuns' commitment to their faith and their community. As they worked, the nuns would often be surrounded by the sounds of the kitchen, the crackling fire in the hearth, the rhythmic thump of dough being kneaded, the gentle scraping of wooden spoons against stone bowls. There was a calming rhythm to their work, a kind of meditative quality that set the pace for the entire day. While the outside world may have been chaotic and filled with the noise of politics, war, and change, the monastery kitchen remained a quiet sanctuary, a place where the outside world could be momentarily forgotten. Historians still debate how much the nuns interacted with the outside world. Some argue that they were isolated, their lives entirely focused on their religious duties, while others suggest that they had more freedom and interaction with the world around them, especially through their work in the kitchen. It's likely that both viewpoints are true in different contexts. While the nuns were certainly devoted to their spiritual practices, many monasteries were also deeply engaged with the surrounding communities. They were not just keepers of knowledge, they were also caretakers of the people, offering food, medicine, and hospitality to those in need. The honey cake was a perfect example of this kind of service. As we've already seen, it wasn't just something the nuns baked for themselves, it was meant to be shared. Whether it was served to fellow nuns, monks, or travellers passing through the monastery, the honey cake was a symbol of hospitality. The nuns understood that food had the power to bring people together, to heal, and to comfort. It was through their labour in the kitchen that they were able to offer something tangible to those who needed it most. The simple act of sharing a piece of cake became an expression of kindness, of welcoming others into the fold of the monastery. But the nuns' quiet work didn't end with the honey cakes. They were also responsible for a range of other food-related tasks, from brewing mead to growing herbs and vegetables in the monastery gardens. Many of the herbs they grew, like lavender, rosemary, and thyme, were used not only in cooking but also in medicine. The nuns understood the importance of using food as a means of healing. Honey, in particular, was a key ingredient in many of the nuns' medicinal remedies. It was used to treat wounds, soothe coughs, and even aid in digestion. The nuns' knowledge of the healing properties of food was an important part of their daily work, blending practical skills with spiritual care. Historians still debate the extent to which the nuns were involved in the medical practices of their time. Some believe that their role as healers was central to their work in the monastery, while others suggest that they were more focused on cooking and hospitality. Whatever the case, it's clear that the nuns understood the power of food, not just as sustenance but as a means of healing and comfort. Their work in the kitchen was an extension of their spiritual care, a way of nourishing the body and the soul. As we reflect on the nuns' role in the kitchen, it's important to remember that their work was a labour of love. It was not about recognition or fame, it was about service, devotion, and humility. The honey cake, in all its simplicity, was a perfect symbol of this. It wasn't a cake meant to impress or to be flaunted. It was a cake meant to be shared, to be enjoyed, and to be appreciated for what it was. A humble offering made with care, dedication, and love. Historians still argue over how much of this quiet, devotional work remains in our modern kitchens. Some suggest that our current understanding of cooking and food preparation is far removed from the contemplative, sacred nature of medieval kitchen work. Others argue that the spirit of that work still exists today, especially in kitchens where the focus is on nourishing others and creating food that is both delicious and meaningful. While the tools and techniques have changed, the core principles of hospitality, care, and devotion that the nuns practiced are still present in many kitchens around the world. As we move forward, we'll explore how these traditions have been passed down through the centuries, how they've influenced the way we think about food today. But for now, let's take a moment to reflect on the quiet work of the nuns in the kitchen. Their legacy is one of simplicity, humility, and care, a reminder that sometimes the most profound acts of service are the ones carried out in silence, behind the scenes, with no expectation of recognition. As we continue to explore the legacy of the nuns and their contributions to food history, we must also consider the broader cultural shifts that influenced the culinary landscape of the medieval world. In many ways, the quiet work of the nuns helped preserve ancient culinary traditions, while also contributing to the evolution of new techniques and flavours. The honey cake, as a product of their careful craftsmanship, not only reflected the culinary preferences of the time, but also echoed the values of the monastic life: simplicity, devotion, and service. But these values didn't exist in a vacuum. They were shaped by broader shifts in culture, society, and religion, and the nuns' kitchens were at the centre of many of these changes. During the medieval period, Europe was undergoing significant transformations. The spread of Christianity, the rise of the feudal system, and the development of global trade all played crucial roles in shaping the culinary practices of the time. The monasteries were often at the forefront of these changes, not just as religious institutions but as economic and cultural centres. As Europe's trade routes expanded, the flow of goods from distant lands introduced new ingredients, spices, and cooking techniques to the monastic kitchens. And while the honey cake remained a staple of monastic life, these outside influences began to shape the flavours and textures of the cakes, adding richness and complexity that would have been unimaginable in earlier times. Consider, for example, the arrival of sugar into Europe during the Middle Ages. While honey was still the primary sweetener in medieval kitchens, sugar began to make its way across trade routes from the Middle East. The introduction of sugar dramatically altered the way that desserts were made, especially cakes and pastries. By the 12th century, sugar had become a luxury commodity in European kitchens, and by the 15th century it was more widely available. It was during this period that the honey cake began to take on new forms, incorporating sugar alongside honey to create a richer, sweeter flavour. While honey remained the centerpiece of the recipe, sugar added a new layer of sweetness that elevated the cake, making it even more beloved among both the nuns and the broader community. Historians still debate when sugar began to replace honey as the primary sweetener in European desserts. Some argue that it wasn't until the late 15th or early 16th century, when sugar became more widely available, that it truly began to change the landscape of baking. Others believe that the process was gradual, with sugar and honey coexisting in medieval recipes for centuries. What's certain, however, is that the introduction of sugar forever changed the way people viewed sweet treats, and the honey cake was no exception. As sugar became more common in the kitchen, it blended seamlessly with the honey, creating a cake that was both familiar and new, a fusion of old and new flavours. But the changes in the kitchen weren't just about ingredients. The very act of baking was also evolving. As ovens became more sophisticated and baking techniques were refined, the process of making honey cakes became more efficient and more consistent. The nuns, always focused on their labour and their service to God, would have embraced these changes using the new technologies to perfect their honey cakes. They would have found new ways to create the perfect cake, golden, tender, and sweet, with just the right balance of honey and spice. The technology may have advanced, but the principles of devotion and care remained unchanged. At the same time, the honey cake's popularity spread beyond the walls of the monastery. As the medieval period came to a close, the honey cake found its place in the homes of the nobility, where it became a symbol of wealth and sophistication. The aristocracy, eager to flaunt their opulence, would have delighted in honey cakes adorned with sugar, fruits, and sometimes even gold leaf. These extravagant versions of the cake were far removed from the humble beginnings of the honey cake in the abbey kitchens, yet they were still connected to the traditions of the monastic bakers. The nobility may have added their own flourishes, but the core of the recipe, the use of honey and spices, remained the same. Historians still debate whether the medieval nobility's love for honey cakes was a reflection of their desire to emulate the simple, pious lives of the nuns, or whether it was simply a way to indulge in something rare and luxurious. Some argue that the nobility's fondness for honey cakes was a form of cultural appropriation, where the rich sought to adopt the humble, communal values of the monastic world for their own pleasure. Others suggest that the growing popularity of the honey cake was more about the changing tastes of society, as food became a symbol of status and sophistication. Regardless of the motivations, the honey cake's transition from a simple monastic treat to a luxury dessert was a reflection of the larger cultural shifts taking place during the late medieval and early Renaissance periods. As society became more complex and as trade routes expanded, the lines between the sacred and the secular began to blur. The honey cake, once a simple offering of devotion, became a symbol of the changing times. Its journey from the monastery to the royal courts and beyond is a testament to the adaptability of food and to the enduring power of culinary traditions to bridge the gap between the sacred and the everyday. As we reflect on this evolution, it's clear that the honey cake, in all its forms, continues to carry the legacy of the nuns who first baked it. The simplicity and devotion with which they created their cakes have persisted through the centuries, even as the recipe itself has evolved. The honey cake's journey from a humble treat in the medieval monastery kitchen to a symbol of wealth and sophistication is a testament to the enduring power of food. It's a reminder that food is never just about taste. It's about culture, history, and connection. In the next part of our journey, we'll take a closer look at the role of honey in medieval healing and how it continued to be used as both food and medicine. From its religious significance to its practical uses in the kitchen, honey has remained a central ingredient in the honey cake, and we'll explore why it continues to hold such a revered place in culinary and medicinal traditions. Honey's role in medieval life wasn't limited to the kitchen. Its significance extended far beyond its use as a sweetener for cakes and bread. In the medieval world, honey was regarded as a powerful substance with both culinary and medicinal properties. The nuns, who had access to both the ingredients of the earth and the knowledge of ancient remedies, were among the first to harness honey's full potential. They understood that honey wasn't just a natural sweetener, it was also a valuable healing agent, believed to have the power to cure everything from coughs and sore throats to wounds and digestive ailments. In the monasteries, honey wasn't just stored in jars for baking, it was carefully preserved for use in medicinal concoctions. The nuns, who often served as healers in their communities, knew that honey had antibacterial and antiseptic properties that could help fight infections and promote healing. It was used in poultices for wounds, as a soothing balm for burns, and as a treatment for a variety of ailments, including coughs, colds, and even digestive issues. When mixed with herbs, honey became a key ingredient in the nuns' medicinal practices, enhancing the healing properties of plants and creating remedies that were both effective and natural. The use of honey in medieval medicine was rooted in ancient traditions. The Greeks and Romans had long recognized honey's medicinal value, using it in remedies for wounds, infections, and even as a means of preserving food. The early medieval monks and nuns, inheritors of this knowledge, adapted these ancient practices to suit their needs, using honey as part of their broader healing efforts. In the monasteries, healing wasn't just a matter of physical care, it was also deeply connected to the spiritual life of the monks and nuns. To them, the act of healing was an extension of their devotion to God, a way of offering care and comfort to those who were suffering. Historians still debate the extent to which honey was used in medieval medicine and how effective these remedies truly were. Some argue that the medieval use of honey was based on superstition rather than scientific understanding, while others suggest that the healing properties of honey were well understood, even if the medical community didn't have the tools to fully explain them. Modern science has confirmed that honey does have genuine antibacterial properties, and it has been shown to be effective in treating wounds and soothing sore throats. But in the medieval world, honey's role in medicine was part of a broader belief that natural substances, when used with the right intention, could work miracles. For the nuns, honey wasn't just a medicinal ingredient, it was a symbol of divine healing. The belief that honey came directly from the bees, who were seen as messengers of God, gave the substance a sacred quality. It was a natural gift from the heavens, one that could heal the body, soothe the spirit, and bring comfort to those in need. The nuns used honey not just as treatment for illness, but as a symbol of their commitment to serving both the body and the soul. They believed that by using honey in their remedies, they were offering both physical and spiritual healing, helping to restore balance to the lives of those who were suffering. The honey cake, then, was more than just a dessert. It was a reminder of honey's healing properties. When the nuns baked their honey cakes, they were offering not just sweetness, but also a connection to the divine. The honey in the cake, with its spiritual significance, was a subtle but powerful reminder of the broader context in which the nuns lived and worked. Every bite of the cake was not just a taste of sweetness, but a taste of the healing powers that honey represented. In this way, the honey cake became a sacred offering, an embodiment of the nuns' faith and their dedication to nourishing both the body and the soul. Historians still argue over the exact role of food in medieval healing. Was it just about treating illness, or was there a deeper spiritual dimension to these practices? Some believe that medieval healers were primarily concerned with the physical aspects of healing, while others argue that the spiritual and physical were deeply intertwined. What's clear, however, is that honey was one of the central elements in the medieval understanding of health and wellness. Its role in both the kitchen and the infirmary was crucial, and its presence in the honey cake served as a reminder of this dual purpose. As we reflect on honey's role in medieval life, it's important to consider how its medicinal use shaped the way people thought about food and healing. In the medieval world, food was not just for sustenance, it was for healing, for comfort, and for connection. Honey, as both a food and a medicine, embodied this belief. It was something that could nourish the body but also restore the soul. And the honey cake, as one of the most cherished foods in the monastery, was a perfect symbol of this philosophy. The nuns' quiet work in the kitchen, their dedication to serving others through food, was part of a larger tradition of healing that went beyond the physical. They understood that food could be both nourishing and sacred. The honey cake, with its combination of honey, spices, and love, was more than just a cake. It was an offering of health, a symbol of the connection between body and spirit. Whether it was served to a weary traveller, a sick patient, or a fellow nun, the honey cake was a reminder that food had the power to heal, to comfort, and to connect us to something greater than ourselves. In the next section, we'll explore how the honey cake's role in healing and hospitality continued to evolve as it became a part of modern culinary traditions. The honey cake's journey from a sacred offering in the medieval kitchen to a beloved dessert in homes around the world is a story of adaptation, transformation, and continuity. It's a story that shows how food can transcend time and place, carrying with it the traditions and values of those who came before us. As we turn the page to modern times, the honey cake's legacy continues to evolve. The once simple, sacred treat baked in medieval monastic kitchens has been reinterpreted, adapted, and celebrated around the world. The honey cake's journey from the walls of the monastery to the homes of everyday people reveals how food can transcend its original context and become something much larger, something that holds cultural, emotional, and even historical significance. In the modern kitchen, honey cakes have evolved into a beloved dessert enjoyed by families during various celebrations, from birthdays to holidays. The honey cake's simplicity, its combination of sweet and spice, and its comforting, familiar flavours make it a perennial favourite. In some cultures, particularly in Jewish communities, honey cakes are an essential part of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. It is believed that the sweetness of the honey cake represents the hope for a sweet and prosperous year ahead. This connection between honey cake and celebration, hope, and renewal carries forward the cake's historical symbolism, which once held religious and spiritual weight. Yet, in the face of this widespread popularity, the honey cake retains echoes of its origins. For instance, the act of making honey cake today can still evoke a sense of tradition and continuity, linking the baker to centuries of practices. Whether it's for a holiday, a family gathering, or a special event, the preparation of a honey cake remains an opportunity to connect with the past. The same ingredients, honey, flour, spices, used by the medieval nuns still make their way into today's cakes. And although modern ovens and ingredients may differ greatly from the medieval kitchens of the nuns, the core of the recipe remains largely the same. Honey still holds its central place, giving the cake that timeless sweetness and connecting it to its past. In the Jewish tradition, the honey cake has an especially deep connection. It's not only a culinary delight, but also a symbol of faith, family, and tradition. Just as medieval honey cakes were shared among the community, today's honey cakes continue to serve as a gesture of hospitality. For Jewish families celebrating the new year, the honey cake is not just a dessert, it's a way of welcoming in a new season, a fresh start, and a sense of unity. And much like the nuns in the monasteries, the honey cake's creation is a communal experience, one that brings families and friends together to share in something sacred, delicious, and meaningful. But honey cakes aren't confined to one culture or one region. As honey became more available and trade routes expanded, the recipe for honey cake travelled far and wide. In many cultures, different variations of honey cake emerged, adapting to local tastes and preferences. For example, in Eastern Europe, honey cakes often incorporate nuts or fruits like raisins and apples, making them more robust and complex. In some countries, honey cakes are baked with heavy spices like cinnamon and cloves, reflecting the flavours of medieval kitchens. In others, the cake is more subtle, with honey as the primary flavour. Across all these variations, the core ingredient, honey, remains central, uniting them in their connection to the original honey cake. Historians still debate how much the modern versions of honey cakes resemble those from medieval times. Some believe that the use of honey in cakes is a continuation of ancient practices, while others argue that the evolution of the honey cake was heavily influenced by the availability of new ingredients, baking techniques, and societal changes. What is undeniable, however, is the fact that honey cake has become a truly global dessert, enjoyed by people from all walks of life. From the cosy kitchens of Europe to the bustling homes of the Middle East and beyond, the honey cake has found its place in kitchens all over the world, carrying with it the rich history of the nuns who first baked it in their stone kitchens. But while the honey cake's place in modern kitchens is secure, it's worth noting that its symbolism hasn't faded over time. The idea of food as an offering, a way of connecting with others, nurturing the body and the soul, still resonates today. The honey cake, as a symbol of hospitality and care, reminds us of the role that food plays in our lives, both as nourishment and as a way of creating meaningful connections. Whether shared among family, given as a gift, or simply enjoyed with a cup of tea, the honey cake remains a powerful reminder of the bonds that food creates. And even beyond its role in communal and family celebrations, the honey cake carries a special resonance for those who appreciate its history. For bakers and food historians, making a honey cake is an opportunity to explore centuries of culinary tradition, to understand the ways that ingredients have evolved, and to feel a direct connection to the past. In each measure of honey, in each pinch of spice, there's a bit of history, a bit of devotion, and a bit of love that's been passed down through generations. The honey cake isn't just a dessert, it's a living piece of history, one that continues to inspire bakers and food lovers around the world. Historians still argue whether food traditions like the honey cake are as tied to the past as we think, or whether they have become diluted by modern trends and innovations. Some argue that the modern honey cake, with its countless variations and adaptations, has strayed far from its medieval roots. Others suggest that these changes are simply part of the natural evolution of food and culture, reflecting the ways in which food connects us to both the past and the present. What we know for sure is that the honey cake, in all its forms, continues to serve as a bridge, connecting us to our medieval ancestors, to their values, and to their simple, sacred rituals. It's a reminder that sometimes the simplest foods have the power to transcend time and place, to carry with them the stories of those who came before us. In the final section of our journey, we'll reflect on the lasting impact of the honey cake and the nuns who first baked it. From the medieval kitchens to the modern-day homes, this simple yet profound treat continues to touch lives, offering both nourishment and a deep connection to the past. As we approach the final reflections on the honey cake's journey through history, it's important to consider the profound impact that the humble cake has had on the lives of so many. From its origins in the stone kitchens of medieval monasteries to its place on modern tables around the world, the honey cake has endured through centuries, not just as a recipe, but as a symbol of the values that shaped its creation: faith, hospitality, and care. The nuns, in their quiet devotion and steadfast commitment to both service and simplicity, set the stage for this legacy. Their dedication to crafting honey cakes, made with honey that was revered as both a food and a medicine, with spices that reflected the world beyond the abbey walls, was not just about nourishment. It was a reflection of their spiritual calling. The act of baking, of preparing food for others, was their way of connecting with the divine, of offering something sweet to their community. And through that simple, sacred act, they built a tradition that has carried on long after their time. Today, when we bake a honey cake, whether for a holiday, a special occasion, or simply to share with loved ones, we are participating in something much older than ourselves. We are carrying forward a tradition that has been passed down through generations. The nuns' honey cakes weren't just about the ingredients or the recipe, they were about the care and love that went into each cake, about the act of creating something from scratch with devotion. And while the modern kitchen may be filled with electric mixers and digital thermometers, the spirit of the nuns' kitchen lives on. We too find solace in the simple act of baking, in the connection it fosters between ourselves and others. Historians still debate whether the communal spiritual act of baking has lost its significance in today's fast-paced, convenience-driven world. Some argue that food has become more of a commodity than a means of connection, while others suggest that cooking, especially baking, still carries profound meaning for many people. Perhaps it's the very simplicity of the honey cake, the combination of basic ingredients, the rhythm of mixing and kneading, the warmth of a freshly baked treat that continues to resonate with us. It's a reminder of a slower, more intentional time when food was made with care and shared with love. In the grand tapestry of history, the honey cake is more than just a delicious dessert. It is a cultural artifact, a living piece of history that connects us to the medieval past, to the nuns who first baked it, and to the traditions that continue to shape our food culture today. It's a sweet reminder that food is not just something we consume, it is something we create, something we share, and something that carries meaning far beyond its taste. As we think about the nuns and their quiet work in the kitchen, it's easy to see how their humble act of baking has impacted generations. Their legacy lives on not only in the recipes they left behind, but also in the way we approach food today. The honey cake serves as a bridge between the past and the present, between tradition and innovation. It reminds us that even in the simplest acts, there can be great meaning, great beauty, and great love. In a world that often feels disconnected, food has the power to bring us back together. And the honey cake, with its history of hospitality, service, and devotion, is a perfect example of that power. Whether it's shared at a family gathering, gifted to a friend, or enjoyed alone with a cup of tea, the honey cake continues to serve as a reminder of the bonds we share, of the traditions that unite us, and of the sweetness that can be found in even the simplest of moments. As we wind down this journey, let's take a moment to appreciate the enduring legacy of the honey cake. Its journey from the medieval kitchens of the nuns to the tables of modern homes is a testament to the lasting power of tradition, hospitality, and the simple, profound act of sharing food. From the sacred to the secular, from the quiet kitchens of the past to the bustling kitchens of today, the honey cake is more than just a treat. It's a symbol of connection, a piece of history, and a reminder that food in all its forms can bring us closer to one another and to the traditions that have shaped us. Now, as you reflect on the journey we've taken together, let the simple sweetness of the honey cake linger in your mind. It's not just the taste of honey and spices, it's the taste of history, of devotion, and of the many generations that have baked, shared, and enjoyed this humble cake. And with that, I wish you sweet dreams, filled with the comforting, warm aroma of honey cakes, freshly baked in a time long past but still very much alive in our hearts. The evolution of the honey cake's recipe and significance isn't just confined to the medieval period, it continued to shape the culinary world through subsequent centuries. As trade routes expanded and social structures evolved, the use of ingredients and the techniques of baking spread far and wide, influencing not just Europe but the world beyond. The honey cake's journey into modern times is as fascinating as its medieval roots, with new regions adopting it, adapting it, and creating their own versions based on local tastes, resources, and religious practices. One of the most significant shifts in the evolution of honey cake came with the expansion of global trade in the early modern period. By the 16th and 17th centuries, the world's trade networks were far more connected than ever before. The rise of the spice trade opened up new avenues for flavour exploration, and this directly impacted the honey cake's recipe. During the Renaissance and the Age of Exploration, merchants brought exotic spices and ingredients from far-flung places like India, the Americas, and Africa. These ingredients found their way into kitchens across Europe, including those of monasteries and convents, where the honey cake was a beloved treat. At this point, spices such as cinnamon, ginger, nutmeg, and cloves were no longer rare luxuries. They had become more accessible to the upper and middle classes. While medieval honey cakes may have been spiced with just a few simple ingredients, these new imports brought complexity to the flavour profiles of the cake. The addition of these spices created a richer, more vibrant taste, and the honey cake evolved into something more decadent. What had once been a simple and humble offering was now a luxury food that could be served at banquets and feasts, adorned with dried fruits, nuts, and even a dusting of gold leaf. The cake had begun its transformation from a sacred offering in the monasteries to a celebratory dessert for the wealthy. Historians still debate how these new spices influenced European culinary practices. Some argue that the increased use of spices led to an overindulgence in sugary, spiced cakes and desserts, reflecting a society's growing desire for opulence. Others suggest that the spices simply made cakes more accessible, as they brought new and exciting flavours to traditional recipes. The honey cake, once a simple offering of faith, now became a complex and rich treat, often served at lavish feasts, weddings, and other significant events. This shift reflected broader changes in European society, a move from the simplicity of the medieval period to the extravagance of the Renaissance and beyond. At the same time, the spread of honey cakes outside the religious context was also due to changes in society. The rising merchant class, which had benefited from the expanding trade networks, sought ways to distinguish themselves from the nobility. These new merchants, shop owners, and craftspeople found joy in hosting lavish dinner parties and celebrations, and the honey cake became an essential part of their feasts. The symbolism of the honey cake as a connection to tradition and religious devotion didn't disappear, it simply transformed. Now, it became a symbol of social status and cultural sophistication, reflecting the host's ability to acquire rare ingredients and create complex dishes. By the 18th century, the honey cake had become a fixture in the homes of Europe, especially in countries with strong culinary traditions. In Germany, for instance, honey cakes, called Honigkuchen, became especially popular during Christmas, where they were decorated with icing and candy, becoming part of the celebration of the Advent season. The honey cake's role as a celebratory dessert deepened, as it was now associated with both the spiritual and festive aspects of life. Families baked them together as part of holiday rituals, further cementing the cake's role in communal celebrations. Historians still debate whether the transformation of the honey cake into a secular dessert was inevitable, or if it was a deliberate act driven by cultural changes. Did the growing influence of the merchant class and their desire to emulate the nobility drive the honey cake's evolution? Or did the cake's symbolism remain intact as it moved from the monasteries to the tables of everyday families? Regardless of the answer, the honey cake's journey through time highlights how food can adapt, transcend its origins, and find new meaning in different contexts. Meanwhile, in the more traditional spaces of the monasteries and convents, the honey cake maintained its sacred role. While the rest of society embraced the evolving recipe, many monastic kitchens continued to prepare the honey cake using the same simple spiritual ingredients: honey, flour, and a bit of spice. The nuns baked these cakes not for luxury or for indulgence, but as an offering to God, a simple act of service that connected them to centuries of tradition. In some ways, this maintained the honey cake's original purpose, though it had changed dramatically in the wider world. In the cloistered kitchens of the nuns, it still remained a spiritual offering. As we move into the modern era, the honey cake's reach continued to expand. With the rise of modern culinary traditions, the cake travelled across continents, adapting to new cultural contexts and becoming a beloved dessert in diverse regions. In the United States, for example, the Jewish community embraced the honey cake as a key part of the Rosh Hashanah celebrations. It was baked to symbolize a sweet new year, offering both a delicious treat and a connection to tradition. The cake, once a symbol of religious devotion in medieval monasteries, had transformed into a symbol of hope and renewal for a new generation of people. In the Middle East, honey cakes also found a place in various religious celebrations. Middle Eastern versions of the cake, often spiced with cardamom, rosewater, and cinnamon, became part of the culinary tradition of hospitality. These honey cakes were baked for weddings, holidays, and festivals, mirroring the cake's earlier role in the monasteries as an offering for special occasions. But no matter where it travelled or how it changed, the honey cake remained deeply rooted in its origins. It continued to symbolize hospitality, faith, and tradition, whether served at a grand feast or baked in a humble kitchen. The nuns' quiet devotion to creating these simple, sacred cakes has left an indelible mark on food history, reminding us that even the simplest dishes can carry deep meaning and carry the weight of centuries. Historians still discuss whether modern culinary traditions have disconnected us from these symbolic aspects of food. With the rise of fast food, prepackaged goods, and convenience-driven eating habits, have we lost touch with the deep connections that food once provided? It's a valid question, and one that many are grappling with today. But when we look at the honey cake, whether in its medieval form, its modern adaptations, or its role in contemporary celebrations, we see how food continues to bridge the past and the present, carrying with it the stories, values, and traditions that define us. As we reflect on the honey cake's journey, it's clear that it is more than just a dessert. It's a living piece of history. It's a reminder of the simple pleasures of sharing food, of offering hospitality, and of nurturing both the body and the soul. The honey cake, whether baked by nuns in medieval monasteries or served at a modern family gathering, continues to carry the legacy of devotion, community, and care. And as long as we continue to bake it, eat it, and share it, that legacy will live on. As we move deeper into the honey cake's rich history, it's important to explore the role it has played not only in kitchens, but also in the broader cultural and spiritual context. While the cake's evolution throughout the centuries is fascinating, the symbolic and spiritual significance it carried in the medieval and early modern period is what truly elevates the honey cake beyond just a sweet treat. The honey cake, from its inception in the monastic kitchens, wasn't simply about flavour. It was about the sacred act of making something that nourished not only the body but also the soul. Food in medieval times wasn't just sustenance, it was an extension of a deeper spiritual practice. Every meal prepared by the nuns was a way to give back to God. The kitchen itself was often seen as a place where physical and spiritual needs met, and each dish prepared was seen as an offering. The honey cake, with its sacred ingredients, honey, flour, and spices, was no exception. For the nuns, every batch of honey cake wasn't just about satisfying a hunger, it was about service, hospitality, and devotion. They understood that in baking and serving food, they were not only meeting the bodily needs of their community, but were also contributing to the spiritual health of the monastery. The honey cake, simple as it was, became an expression of piety. When guests, especially pilgrims or travellers, arrived at the monastery, the honey cake would often be one of the first things offered to them, welcoming them into the fold of the community. This wasn't just food, it was a gesture of kindness and care, a physical manifestation of the monastery's commitment to service and compassion. It was a way for the nuns to offer something sweet to others, a small but significant way of showing hospitality. Historians still argue about the origins of hospitality in medieval Europe. Some suggest that it was always an inherent part of Christian teachings, while others believe it grew out of necessity and community bonding during times of hardship. Whatever the case, the role of food in hospitality was indisputable, and the honey cake, because of its relatively simple ingredients and ease of preparation, became a staple of hospitality in monastic kitchens, providing comfort to weary travellers who had endured long journeys. What's interesting, however, is that the honey cake didn't just embody hospitality in the way we think of it today. It was also about shared experiences. Meals in the monasteries were communal affairs, filled with moments of reflection, prayer, and connection. When a guest was served honey cake, they were being invited not just to eat but to share in the spiritual life of the monastery. The act of eating, of sitting down together at the table, created bonds that went beyond mere physical nourishment. It was an opportunity to experience community, to reflect on the shared human experience, and to feel connected to something larger than oneself. As centuries passed, the role of the honey cake in religious rituals continued to evolve, even as its meaning remained largely the same. By the 16th century, as the Protestant Reformation and the Catholic Counter-Reformation reshaped Europe, food became an important aspect of the debates about religious practices and the role of rituals in daily life. Both the Protestant reformers and Catholic counter-reformers were keenly aware of the significance of food in religious observance and the act of hospitality. While the Protestant Reformation sought to minimize the ritualistic use of food in religious practices, Catholic monastic orders, particularly in Spain and Italy, continued to celebrate the sacred act of sharing food with the community, a symbol of spiritual unity. Historians still debate how the changing religious landscape of Europe affected food traditions like the honey cake. Some argue that the Protestant Reformation sought to distance itself from the ritualistic aspects of Catholicism, which included feasts and elaborate meal-sharing practices. Others suggest that food remained a way for Catholics to express their devotion, albeit in a less ostentatious way. In either case, what is clear is that food continued to be an important part of religious identity, symbolizing both devotion and a commitment to community. And within this landscape, the honey cake retained its place as a humble but deeply significant offering. As we move further into modern times, the honey cake's symbolism becomes even more fascinating. The rise of the Industrial Revolution and the advent of mass production led to a major shift in how food was consumed and prepared. No longer was every meal made from scratch with the same care and devotion that the nuns had put into their honey cakes. The process of preparing food became quicker and more commercialized, and in many ways, the spiritual connection to food was lost. Convenience foods and mass-produced ingredients became the norm, and the act of cooking, especially in the home, became less about devotion and more about practicality. Historians still argue about whether these changes in food production and consumption have caused society to lose touch with the deeper spiritual aspects of food. Some suggest that we've become disconnected from the sacredness of food and cooking, while others believe that the modern age has simply adapted to the realities of time and resources. In either case, the honey cake's journey through history reflects how food, in all its forms, continues to evolve in response to changing times. But what remains consistent is the cake's ability to bring people together, to symbolize hospitality, and to serve as a tangible connection to something greater than ourselves. In the present day, as we bake and share honey cakes, whether for a holiday, a special occasion, or simply as a treat for family and friends, we continue to engage with the cake's deep-rooted symbolism. The act of baking, of preparing something from scratch, is an act of care and service. It's a way to connect with others, to show love, and to offer something sweet and comforting. Whether we're serving a honey cake at a family dinner, a holiday gathering, or a community event, the cake still carries the legacy of its medieval origins, a legacy of devotion, hospitality, and connection. Historians still discuss whether the traditional values of food and hospitality still hold in modern society. Have we lost the ability to truly connect through food in the same way that people did in the past? Some argue that the communal, spiritual aspects of food have been lost in the rush of modern life, while others suggest that food still holds a powerful ability to unite us even in our busy modern world. Perhaps as we look at the honey cake, we can find a middle ground. Even in today's fast-paced world, there's still room for the kinds of traditions and values that the honey cake represents. As we reflect on the enduring legacy of the honey cake, it's clear that its journey is not just about culinary techniques or ingredients. It's about the deeper values that food represents, the connection to tradition, to community, and to the sacred. Whether it's served in a medieval monastery or at a modern family gathering, the honey cake continues to symbolize love, hospitality, and faith. And in that way, it remains as relevant today as it was centuries ago. As we look at the honey cake in the modern world, it's important to acknowledge how food, especially something as timeless as this humble cake, continues to weave together the threads of culture, history, and family. The honey cake has truly come full circle. What once began as an offering in a medieval monastic kitchen has now become a global symbol of celebration, tradition, and unity. Whether it's being baked for a Jewish New Year celebration, shared at a family gathering, or served at an event that marks an important moment in someone's life, the honey cake continues to play a vital role in connecting people to the past, each slice carrying with it the echoes of centuries-old practices and beliefs. In many ways, the honey cake's journey into modern life mirrors the way we think about food today. We may not always consider the deep spiritual and historical implications of what we eat, but the act of sharing a meal still holds powerful meaning. Food continues to act as a bridge between generations, bringing people together across time and space. The honey cake's enduring presence is a reminder that food, at its core, is about more than sustenance. It is about creating experiences, building community, and offering something of ourselves to those we love. One of the most significant aspects of the honey cake's modern journey is the resurgence of interest in traditional cooking and sustainable practices. In a world where convenience food and fast meals dominate, there's been a growing movement to return to the basics, to cook meals from scratch using whole, natural ingredients. This movement echoes many of the principles of the medieval kitchen, where nuns would craft honey cakes with care and devotion, focusing on the quality of the ingredients and the intent behind the work. Many modern bakers who embrace this movement find that there's something deeply satisfying and meaningful about taking the time to make food from scratch, just as the nuns did centuries ago. For those who bake honey cakes today, the process often serves as a form of reflection. There's a certain mindfulness in the act of mixing ingredients by hand, of carefully watching the cake rise, and of sharing the fruits of that labour with others. Just as the medieval nuns might have found peace and joy in their kitchen, modern bakers often experience a sense of connection to the past when they bake honey cakes. They're not just following a recipe, they're continuing a tradition, keeping alive the practices and values that have been passed down through generations. In addition to this, the honey cake has evolved in terms of presentation. As much as the basic recipe has remained the same, the ways in which it is decorated and presented have expanded. Today, bakers often adorn their honey cakes with fruits, nuts, or even glaze, reflecting modern tastes while maintaining the cake's essential simplicity. Some might incorporate local flavours, adding regional twists that highlight the diversity of the global honey cake. Yet, despite these adaptations, the cake remains rooted in its spiritual and cultural origins. No matter how it's decorated, it is still a cake that embodies tradition, warmth, and connection. Historians still debate how much food traditions have changed due to the increasing commercialization of the food industry. While many argue that mass production and commercialization have stripped food of its cultural significance, others suggest that these changes have created new opportunities to explore and adapt traditional recipes. The honey cake is a perfect example of this dynamic. While its basic form has remained largely unchanged, the way it's baked, served, and enjoyed has evolved, influenced by both modern trends and traditional values. It's a balancing act, maintaining the integrity of the recipe while embracing the possibilities of innovation. But even with these modern adaptations, the honey cake continues to serve as a living connection to the past. Every time someone bakes a honey cake, they are not just recreating a recipe, they're connecting with a centuries-old tradition of sharing food, celebrating community, and honouring faith. The nuns who first baked honey cakes in their stone kitchens may have never imagined that their simple offering would spread across the world, but their legacy endures in the cakes that are baked today, in the spirit of hospitality and devotion that continues to inspire bakers and food lovers everywhere. In a world where food trends come and go, the honey cake remains a constant, a symbol of the power of tradition, of shared experiences, and of the deep, often unspoken connections that food can create. Whether it's baked for a special occasion, shared with friends and family, or passed down through generations, the honey cake's enduring appeal lies in its ability to bring people together, to create a sense of belonging, and to remind us of the values that transcend time. It's more than just a recipe. It's a symbol of the relationships that have shaped human history. As we continue to look at the honey cake's place in the modern world, it's clear that it is more than just a dessert. It's a powerful reminder of the human need to connect, to share, and to honour the past. Food has always been a central part of our lives, but it's when we pause to think about the deeper meanings behind what we eat that we can truly appreciate its significance. The honey cake, in all its forms, is a beautiful example of how food can be both a personal expression and a shared experience, a way of honouring our history while creating new traditions. Historians still ask whether we, in our modern lives, can learn from the simplicity and intention of medieval cooking. In an age dominated by convenience and speed, there's something to be said for taking the time to prepare food with care and mindfulness, as the nuns did with their honey cakes. Perhaps, as we continue to share these cakes with one another, we can also embrace the values they represent, values of community, hospitality, and connection to something greater than ourselves. In the next section, we'll explore the deeper spiritual connection that food, specifically the honey cake, continues to have in religious and cultural rituals. We'll take a closer look at how the symbolism of the honey cake is still embraced in various cultures, and how it continues to serve as an offering, a connection, and a tradition that transcends time. As we reflect on the honey cake's continued cultural and spiritual significance, it's important to explore how the cake plays a role in religious and cultural rituals today. While the honey cake may have once been primarily a product of the monastic kitchen, it has since become a symbol of faith, hope, and renewal in many religious and cultural contexts. The honey cake, with its deep roots in hospitality and sacred offering, still serves as a key ingredient in celebrations, reflecting the ongoing connection between food, spirituality, and community. In Jewish traditions, the honey cake is most famously associated with Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. During this time, honey is used symbolically to represent the sweetness of the year ahead, and honey cakes are prepared to usher in a new cycle of life, full of prosperity, health, and joy. The act of baking and sharing honey cake during Rosh Hashanah has a profound connection to the themes of renewal, reflection, and connection with God. It is a way of welcoming the new year with a reminder of the sweetness of life and the hope for a fruitful year ahead. This practice, much like its origins in medieval Christian monastic kitchens, reflects a sacred act of offering, but now it extends to a broader community. The sharing of honey cakes at the holiday table fosters a sense of connection, a link to family and tradition, and a reaffirmation of faith. The honey cake in this context transcends its simple role as a dessert. It becomes a way for families and communities to come together, to reflect on the past year, and to share in the hope of a brighter future. The symbolism of honey in the cake is rich with meaning, sweetness, blessing, and the natural world. The honey cake is not just a culinary tradition, it's a way of inviting the divine into daily life, reinforcing the connection between the spiritual and the material. Even as the recipe and ingredients have adapted over the centuries, the deeper spiritual meaning of the honey cake remains as relevant today as it was in the time of the medieval nuns. Historians still debate the extent to which food serves as a spiritual symbol in modern religious rituals. Some suggest that contemporary food rituals, like the sharing of honey cake during Rosh Hashanah, are increasingly disconnected from their original sacred meanings. Others argue that the symbolic power of food, its ability to link us to the divine and to the past, remains as strong as ever. What is clear, however, is that the honey cake's role in religious traditions demonstrates the enduring power of food to connect us to something larger than ourselves. Whether it's used to symbolize the sweetness of the year ahead, as in Jewish traditions, or to mark the transition from one season to another, the honey cake continues to serve as a powerful cultural and spiritual symbol. The role of honey cake in other cultures is just as significant. In Eastern Orthodox Christianity, honey cakes are often prepared as part of religious feasts and celebrations. These cakes, much like the honey cakes of the medieval period, are made with honey, nuts, and spices, and they often serve as offerings at religious events, including baptisms, weddings, and saints' feast days. The honey cake's enduring presence in these rituals reflects its continuing role as a symbol of divine sweetness and hospitality. Just as the medieval nuns prepared honey cakes as offerings to God and to those they served, today's honey cakes are still baked as a way of honouring faith, tradition, and community. In many of these cultures, the honey cake is more than just food. It is a way of creating bonds between people, reinforcing spiritual practices, and symbolizing the shared human experience. For those who bake and share honey cakes, the act is not just about indulging in a sweet treat. It's about honoring the spiritual and cultural practices that have been passed down through generations. The honey cake, through its ingredients, its symbolism, and its connection to food traditions, continues to foster a sense of unity, connection, and shared history. But the honey cake's role is not just confined to religious rituals. It has also found its way into the everyday life of families and communities around the world. The cake continues to serve as a symbol of hospitality, warmth, and care. And, in many homes, baking honey cake for a guest or family member is a way of showing love and offering something special. It's an opportunity to share not just a delicious dessert, but also a piece of history, a link to generations past, and a shared understanding of the value of food as a medium for connection and care. The symbolism of honey in the cake is powerful. It represents not only the sweetness of life, but also the nourishment and healing properties that honey has held since ancient times. In medieval Europe, honey was used not only for baking, but also as a key ingredient in medicinal remedies. Its antibacterial and antiseptic properties were well known, and it was used to treat a variety of ailments. Today, honey still carries a certain reverence, especially in its natural raw form, valued for its purity and healing properties. In baking the honey cake, we're not just celebrating food, we're connecting to a long history of healing, nourishment, and offering. The honey cake then serves as a bridge between the past and the present. It's a way to honour the traditions of our ancestors while still embracing the joys and connections of the modern world. Whether it's shared at a religious celebration, a family gathering, or a community event, the honey cake carries with it the rich symbolism of sweetness, healing, hospitality, and connection. In a world that often feels fragmented and disconnected, the act of baking and sharing a honey cake can bring people together, fostering a sense of unity, tradition, and shared experience. Historians still debate whether the modern world has lost the deeper connections between food and spirituality. As we look at the honey cake, we see that in many ways those connections are alive and well. The simple act of baking and sharing this cake continues to carry profound meaning, whether it's for a religious ritual, a family tradition, or an expression of hospitality. The honey cake's enduring appeal lies not just in its flavour, but in its ability to bring people together, to symbolise the sweetness of life, and to connect us to something greater than ourselves, just as it did for the nuns who first baked it centuries ago. As we continue our journey with the honey cake, we see that its significance transcends time. It continues to symbolise hospitality, faith, and connection. Whether baked for a religious festival, a family gathering, or simply to enjoy, the honey cake is a living tradition, carrying with it the sweetness of history, faith, and shared humanity. As we move further into the honey cake's rich journey, it becomes clear that the cake holds an almost magical ability to adapt, evolve, and transcend its original religious and cultural contexts. Beyond its role in communal religious rituals, honey cake has found a special place in the personal, everyday moments of life. Whether baked to celebrate birthdays, anniversaries, or seasonal holidays, it remains a deeply personal food, symbolising warmth, tradition, and love. The simple act of baking a honey cake for a friend or loved one speaks to the universal human desire to connect through food, a desire that crosses boundaries of time, culture, and tradition. In modern times, the honey cake has been reimagined in countless ways, blending local flavours, preferences, and modern sensibilities with its ancient roots. This adaptability is one of the key reasons that honey cake continues to thrive across cultures and continents. No longer limited to the monasteries or even the grand feasts of the elite, honey cake has become a household staple in many countries, often enjoyed during the fall months, especially around harvest time. Its sweet, spiced nature is a perfect reflection of the season's bounty, warm, comforting, and fragrant with the flavours of cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg. The variations of honey cake are as diverse as the cultures that embrace it. In Eastern Europe, honey cakes are often more substantial, rich with nuts, fruits, and syrup, making them perfect for cold winters and long gatherings. In the Middle East, honey cakes are often spiced with cardamom, saffron, and rosewater, incorporating the fragrant and floral notes that are characteristic of regional desserts. And in many Western kitchens, honey cakes have been adapted into lighter, more delicate versions, served with whipped cream or fruit compote. Despite these adaptations, the essence of the honey cake, the rich, golden honey at its heart, remains unchanged, a thread that connects all the different versions. In each of these variations, the honey cake continues to serve as a symbol of hospitality, community, and care. It is more than just a dessert, it is a gift. Whether baked for a celebration or as a simple gesture of kindness, the honey cake is a way of offering something sweet, something made with love to those around us. It speaks to the human need for connection and the joy we find in sharing our lives, our traditions, and our cultures with others. Historians still debate whether this shift from religious to secular uses of the honey cake diminishes its deeper meanings. Some argue that its journey into modern kitchens, often far removed from the original sacred context, has led to a loss of its spiritual significance. Others contend that the honey cake, even in its modern forms, continues to carry the essence of those original offerings. The simple act of baking and sharing the cake, after all, is a deeply human act of giving, an act that transcends its ingredients and reaches towards something more profound: community, care, and love. As we look at the honey cake in the context of modern life, it becomes clear that it still retains a place of honour in our rituals and celebrations. Just as it once symbolised the sweetness of divine grace in monastic kitchens, today it continues to represent sweetness, joy, and the richness of life in the homes of families and communities. The act of sharing honey cake has become, in many ways, a universal gesture, one that transcends cultural and religious boundaries. Whether baked to mark a significant event, or simply as a means of connecting with others, the honey cake remains an enduring symbol of care and connection. The recipe for honey cake, while rich in history, is remarkably simple and accessible, and it's one of the most enduring desserts that families have passed down through generations. This accessibility, paired with its rich symbolism, is what has helped the honey cake survive and thrive in modern kitchens. It's not just a cake, it's a piece of history, a piece of the shared human experience made with ingredients that have stood the test of time. And for many bakers, this connection to history is what makes the honey cake so special. As we continue to bake and share honey cakes, we are reminded of the nuns who first baked them as acts of service, devotion, and faith. In that quiet kitchen, long ago, they created something much more than a simple dessert. They created a symbol of community, of hospitality, and of connection to something larger than themselves. And in that same spirit, we continue to bake and share honey cakes today, honouring the traditions of the past while embracing the shared joy and sweetness of the present. Historians still debate whether the honey cake's symbolism has shifted over time. Has it lost its spiritual significance as it has moved from religious rituals to secular gatherings? Or is its meaning still as powerful as it ever was? In some ways, the shift from religious to secular uses only reinforces the cake's deep and lasting symbolism. Whether we bake it to celebrate a holiday, a family gathering, or the simple pleasures of life, the honey cake continues to carry the essence of love, community, and connection. It is a reminder that even in a world that often feels fragmented and disconnected, food has the power to bring us back together. In the next section, we'll explore how the honey cake's evolution has been influenced by cultural and geographical factors, and how it continues to reflect the changing tastes and values of the societies that have embraced it. We'll take a closer look at how different regions have adapted the honey cake, incorporating their own traditions and flavours, and how these adaptations have enriched the cake's legacy. As we continue to explore the journey of the honey cake, it becomes evident that its evolution has been deeply influenced by cultural and geographical factors. Each region that embraced the honey cake adapted it in ways that reflected their own unique tastes, ingredients, and traditions. From the Middle East to Eastern Europe, and even across the Atlantic to the Americas, the honey cake has taken on many forms. Its story is one of cultural exchange, adaptation, and transformation, illustrating the profound impact that food can have in both shaping and reflecting the values of different societies. One of the most fascinating aspects of the honey cake's evolution is how it was shaped by the diverse ingredients available in different regions. In the Middle East, where spices like saffron, cardamom, and cinnamon were common, these flavours began to find their way into honey cake recipes. These cakes, often referred to as Middle Eastern honey cakes, were sometimes infused with rosewater, orange blossom water, or other floral elements, giving them a fragrant, delicate taste that differed from the more straightforward honey-sweetened cakes of the West. These honey cakes were often served as part of larger feasts and celebrations, continuing the honey cake's role as a symbol of hospitality and festive joy. The spiced honey cake became a key feature of events like weddings, family gatherings, and major religious holidays in the region, maintaining its cultural and spiritual significance. In Eastern Europe, honey cake took on a more robust and hearty form, often combined with fruits, nuts, and even a touch of alcohol like rum or brandy. These cakes were typically darker, denser, and more moist than their Mediterranean counterparts, reflecting the region's colder climate and the influence of Russian and Polish baking traditions. These cakes, often called honey breads or spiced honey cakes, were not just desserts. They were integral to the celebrations surrounding holidays such as Christmas and New Year. They were also baked during harvest festivals, where honey represented the sweetness of the season's yield. Interestingly, the honey cake became a central component of Jewish culture in Eastern Europe, particularly in Poland and Russia. Jewish families would bake honey cakes as part of their Rosh Hashanah celebrations, marking the start of the Jewish New Year, with prayers for a sweet and prosperous year ahead. The honey cake, now intertwined with Jewish identity and religious customs, became a beloved symbol of faith, family, and the hope for renewal. In these regions, honey cakes were often adorned with simple decorations like powdered sugar or cinnamon, but their deeper meaning lay in the ritual of baking and sharing the cakes, a way of honouring the past, embracing tradition, and connecting with family and community. In Western countries, particularly in the United States, the honey cake took on a slightly different form. With the influx of immigrants from Eastern Europe, the honey cake found its way into American kitchens, where it evolved once more. As the cake spread across the country, it was adapted to suit a more diverse palate, often being lightened with the addition of ingredients like lemon zest or vanilla. The honey cake's role in Jewish New Year celebrations continued to grow in America, with families proudly passing down recipes from one generation to the next. However, the cake also found a place in secular American traditions. The connection between honey and sweetness made it a popular choice for all sorts of festive occasions, from birthdays to Thanksgiving. Historians still debate whether the adaptation of the honey cake in America marks a significant shift in its meaning and symbolism. Some argue that, in the melting pot of American society, the cake lost some of its sacred and cultural significance, becoming just another dessert among many. Others contend that the honey cake's role in Jewish and other religious communities kept its symbolic power intact, even as it became more widely embraced by the general public. Regardless of these differing perspectives, the honey cake in America retained its connection to tradition, community, and the act of sharing, even as it was adapted to meet the tastes and preferences of a new culture. The adaptation of the honey cake in different regions isn't just a reflection of shifting tastes and ingredients, it also represents broader cultural and historical processes. In many ways, the honey cake is a product of migration, trade, and cultural exchange. Its journey from medieval monasteries to the homes of European peasants, and eventually across the globe, mirrors the movement of people and ideas throughout history. The honey cake's evolution is a testament to the way food can carry with it the stories of migration, adaptation, and the blending of cultures. It's a living symbol of the human capacity to take something simple, like honey, and transform it into something that speaks to faith, family, and community. In the modern era, the honey cake continues to serve as a link between the past and the present. As people across the world continue to bake and share honey cakes, they're participating in a global tradition that spans centuries. Whether baked in the kitchens of Eastern Europe, the Middle East, or the United States, the honey cake continues to carry with it the values of hospitality, celebration, and spiritual renewal. It's a way of connecting with the past while embracing the present, of maintaining tradition in a rapidly changing world. Historians still ask whether food can truly preserve cultural memory, especially in a globalized world where so many foods are homogenized and commercialized. Some suggest that as food becomes more standardized, it loses the cultural richness and personal connection it once had. But perhaps, as we see with the honey cake, food's ability to adapt and evolve is just as important as its ability to preserve tradition. In the case of the honey cake, its ability to cross boundaries, to be embraced by different cultures and communities, is what has allowed it to survive and thrive across centuries. As we conclude our exploration of the honey cake's cultural and geographical adaptations, we can see that the cake's ability to adapt to different regions and societies is part of what makes it so enduring. From the medieval kitchens of the nuns to the modern kitchens of families around the world, the honey cake continues to carry with it the essence of hospitality, care, and connection. It is a living, breathing tradition, passed down through generations and adapted to meet the needs and tastes of each new time and place. In the next section, we'll examine the honey cake's enduring popularity and the ways in which it continues to inspire creativity in the kitchen. We'll look at how the cake's history and symbolism continue to influence the ways it is baked, decorated, and shared in contemporary culture. But for now, let's take a moment to reflect on the honey cake's remarkable ability to transcend time and place, creating connections between people, cultures, and traditions in ways that are both meaningful and sweet. As we continue to reflect on the honey cake's enduring popularity and relevance in modern culture, we can't overlook how the cake's deep-rooted symbolism still holds sway in contemporary kitchens. What makes the honey cake truly unique is its ability to inspire both tradition and creativity. It has been adapted countless times, reinvented in various ways, and embraced by home bakers and professional chefs alike. From the simplest, most rustic versions baked with care in family kitchens to more elaborate contemporary interpretations, the honey cake remains a beloved food, still drawing on the same rich symbolism that made it so cherished centuries ago. At its core, the honey cake represents the warmth and sweetness of life. It serves as a tangible symbol of community, hospitality, and love. And as modern home bakers continue to reinterpret the cake for contemporary occasions, it remains a go-to choice for holiday celebrations, family gatherings, and even quiet moments of personal reflection. Whether it's made in a traditional style or adorned with the latest trends in baking, the honey cake continues to capture the essence of what food can represent: connection, nourishment, and care. One of the most interesting ways the honey cake has been adapted in recent years is through its presentation. While the cake has traditionally been a simple, unadorned dessert, modern bakers have begun to experiment with new ways to decorate and serve the honey cake. For instance, some bakers have introduced more intricate icing designs, creating artistic patterns or adding colour to the cakes with natural food dyes. Others have embraced the trend of naked cakes, where the honey cake's natural texture and layers are exposed, giving it a more rustic yet elegant look. These adaptations serve to elevate the honey cake beyond just a simple dessert into a showstopper that can stand proudly at the centre of any gathering. Bakers today also explore more exotic twists on the classic honey cake. Some incorporate regional ingredients to reflect modern tastes. For example, spices like matcha, cardamom, or even chili can be added to give the honey cake a contemporary flavour profile. These creative adaptations introduce new layers of flavour while still honouring the cake's traditional roots. There are honey cakes that incorporate chocolate ganache, fruits like pomegranate or figs, and even more daring ingredients like coffee or hazelnut paste. These variations allow the honey cake to evolve with the times, demonstrating that the cake can be as versatile as it is symbolic. What makes these modern versions so special is that, despite their innovation, they retain the core essence of the honey cake. The honey, as the main ingredient, always shines through, providing that familiar sweetness that's been cherished for centuries. And even with these creative updates, the cake continues to serve the same function it always has. It's a way of coming together, of sharing something that nourishes the body and soul. Whether baked as a traditional honey cake or as a more contemporary version, it still fosters the same connections between people, just as it did for the medieval nuns and their guests. While many modern food trends come and go, the honey cake endures, adapting to new techniques and tastes while preserving the cultural and spiritual significance it holds. It's a perfect example of how food can evolve with the times without losing sight of its origins. The honey cake continues to carry with it the enduring values of hospitality, faith, and connection to community. No matter how it is prepared, whether in a modern, sleek kitchen or an old-fashioned family kitchen, it still acts as a vessel for care and generosity. Historians still discuss whether the evolving food trends of today, such as the rise of fusion cuisine, dilute the significance of traditional dishes. Some argue that modern adaptations are essential for keeping culinary traditions relevant and accessible to new generations. Others feel that these changes, while exciting, may overshadow the deeper meanings and cultural context behind these foods. The honey cake provides an excellent example of how a traditional food can both evolve and retain its cultural power. Despite the many variations it has undergone, the honey cake remains a symbol of continuity, a testament to the power of food to carry forward cultural and familial traditions. Moreover, honey cake is not just popular in private kitchens, it has earned a place in the professional world too. Many contemporary chefs incorporate honey cake into their dessert menus, often adding their own creative twist. Whether in upscale restaurants, bakeries, or at artisanal markets, the honey cake continues to find its way into the hearts and stomachs of food lovers. Its popularity is a reminder that the most beloved dishes are those that tap into something deeper, an emotional connection to the past, to culture, and to community. The honey cake's ability to straddle the line between modern and traditional is what makes it such a powerful symbol. It speaks to the past while allowing space for innovation. As the cake travels across the world, from kitchen to kitchen, from home to home, it carries with it a piece of history, a history that spans centuries but remains as relevant as ever. The honey cake, whether in its simplest form or as a modern reinvention, serves as a constant reminder of the things that matter most, the connections we share with each other, the love we offer, and the joy we find in the act of giving. Historians still question the role of food in contemporary society. As convenience food and fast-paced lifestyles dominate our modern world, do we risk losing touch with the deeper meanings that food once held? Some argue that we have become disconnected from the act of cooking, from the spiritual and emotional resonance of sharing a meal. But when we bake and share honey cakes, we are engaging in an act that connects us to something deeper than just the ingredients. It connects us to tradition, to culture, and to the people we care about. It's this timeless aspect of food, the way it brings people together, that gives the honey cake its lasting appeal. As we conclude this journey through the history of the honey cake, it's clear that this humble dessert is much more than just a recipe. It is a bridge between the past and the present, a symbol of continuity, and a testament to the power of food to shape culture and connect people. Whether you're baking a honey cake in your kitchen, sharing it with loved ones, or simply enjoying a slice, you are participating in a tradition that has endured for centuries. And in that simple act, you're helping to keep alive the values of hospitality, care, and connection that the honey cake represents. As we reach the final chapter in the story of the honey cake, it's important to reflect on how the legacy of this humble dessert continues to shape both our personal lives and collective history. From its medieval origins as a sacred offering in the kitchens of nuns to its status as a beloved dish in homes and restaurants across the world, the honey cake embodies the essence of tradition, service, and connection. Its journey through time mirrors the ways in which food continues to carry forward cultural legacies, providing nourishment not only to the body but also to the soul. Throughout its long history, the honey cake has been a silent yet constant companion in the rituals of celebration, hospitality, and remembrance. It has stood the test of time, evolving alongside shifting cultures and changing tastes, yet always remaining rooted in its core values. For the nuns who first baked it, the honey cake was an offering, a symbol of devotion to God and service to the community. For countless generations since, it has remained an enduring symbol of care, warmth, and connection, bringing people together at the table, fostering community and creating shared experiences. Historians still debate the true nature of food's role in our lives. Some see food as a mere source of sustenance, while others view it as a vessel for memory, culture, and emotion. The honey cake serves as a powerful reminder that food is never just about taste, it's about meaning. Whether baked to mark a religious occasion, to celebrate a family milestone, or to share a moment of love and care, the honey cake remains a deeply meaningful food that connects the past to the present and the present to the future. In our modern world, where technology, convenience, and fast food often dominate the culinary landscape, there is something deeply grounding about the act of baking a honey cake. It's an opportunity to slow down, to engage with the history and tradition behind the recipe, and to share something truly meaningful with others. The simple act of mixing honey, flour, and spices becomes a meditation on care, love, and the importance of sharing food as a way of connecting to the people we cherish. As we think about the honey cake's enduring legacy, it's clear that its influence extends far beyond its role in the kitchen. It has become a symbol of hospitality, a gesture of love, and a reminder that the simple things in life often carry the deepest meanings. In a world that sometimes feels fragmented and disconnected, the honey cake stands as a reminder of the importance of tradition, community, and connection. It's also worth considering the impact of the honey cake on future generations. Just as the recipe has been passed down from the medieval kitchens to modern-day homes, it will continue to be shared with children, grandchildren, and beyond. The simple act of baking a honey cake and the values that come with it will continue to shape the way we understand food, family, and culture. The honey cake, in all its forms, is not just a treat. It's a way of passing on a legacy, ensuring that the traditions of hospitality, love, and community continue to thrive. So, as you reflect on the journey of the honey cake, remember that it is more than just a dessert. It's a symbol of everything that food can be. It is an offering of care, a bridge between generations, and a testament to the enduring power of tradition. The honey cake connects us to the past, to those who came before us, and to the values they held dear. And in that connection, we find something truly sweet, a reminder that the act of sharing food is always about more than just the ingredients. It's about love, care, and community. As you continue to bake, share, and enjoy honey cakes in your own life, carry with you the understanding that this tradition is more than just culinary. It's spiritual, cultural, and deeply human. Every time you make a honey cake, you're taking part in something much larger than yourself. You're keeping alive a centuries-old tradition, one that has brought sweetness to the world in more ways than one. Whether it's a birthday, a holiday, or just a quiet afternoon spent with loved ones, the honey cake will always hold a special place in the story of who we are and what connects us. Now, as you reflect on the legacy of the honey cake, Take a moment to consider the role food plays in your life. How do the foods you make, share, and enjoy bring you closer to your community, your family, and your traditions? Like the honey cake, food continues to be a way of connecting, a way of sharing love, and a way of carrying forward the values that matter most. It's a reminder that in the end, food is not just about filling our stomachs. It's about nourishing our souls, 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 nourishing.